In this video, I will provide an overview of graphing in Origin. Please note that we have many other movies that focus on specific graphing features. Here we are looking at a workbook with 3 worksheets, each with delta temperature, magnetic field, and position versus time. Let's go ahead and plot position from the first worksheet. To do that, we simply highlight the column. Each column in Origin has a plotting designation, and Origin will automatically plot against the associated X column in the worksheet. I can now just choose from the plot menu, my plot type, and the graph will be created. A reminder message opens up explaining that Origin graphs are all created from templates. Every graph element can be edited. Simply click on the data plot to select it and use the Style toolbar to change the color. Depending upon where you double-click on the graph, for example, if I click here, that unselects the data plot. If I click again, it selects the layer frame. And a double-click in this area would bring me into the plot details at the layer properties level, where I can modify properties of the layer itself. I can expand the hierarchy on the left and then change my selection to the data plot, and the tabs on the right will update accordingly. Now let's say we want to add the position column from the third worksheet. What I'm going to do is position my worksheet and my graph side by side, make that worksheet active, and then I can simply drag and drop the data into the graph. You hover the mouse until you see the pointer with the little graphs icon, and then drag and drop it into your graph window. A message pops up asking if you wish to rescale the axes to include the newly added data. Another way for us to add data to this graph is to double-click on the layer icon. A dialog opens where you have available data on the left and data that's plotted in the graph on the right. I can expand this drop-down here and then filter the columns that I see based on my selection. You can plot data from any worksheet anywhere within your project. The data that is bold here is the data that's already in the layer. We can sort by long name, and I can quickly see I want to add this one to the layer. Now if I drag my selection to include all 3, I can group those, and grouping will then increment my data plot line color. Let's go ahead now and update our graph legend. To do that, we click on the graph menu and choose Update Legend. A dialog opens. We can simply update to include the comments from all 3 data plots. Let me go ahead now and plot data from this second sheet here. Let's create a graph of delta temperature and position. I need to hold down the Control key while clicking on position to select just those 2 columns. We're going to plot these against time, so there's no need for me to highlight that column. It'll automatically recognize that. You can see the scales are somewhat different here. So let's go ahead now and plot this data in one of our multi-curve options. We'll do the double Y. This graph has 2 layers, 2 independent Y scales with a shared X scale. Now if you want to plot data from different sheets, one quick way to do this is to start by not selecting any of the data. Click on your plot menu, choose your plot type, and the Plot Setup dialog will open. It's comprised of 3 panels. The top panel is your available data. Again, you can filter here like you could in the Layer Contents dialog. You can specify your plot type. The middle panel here shows you the columns based on your selection at the top. I can select multiple worksheets, and then what I see in the middle panel is the columns that are common by long name. I could change this to short name or some other, or by column index. So now I'm going to plot time as my X, delta temperature as my Y, go ahead and click Add, and it will add the data from all 3 sheets and automatically group them. Now please note that I did use the same plotting designations as was set up in the worksheet. However, what you choose here is independent of what is set in the worksheet, so I could have plotted time as Y. In this dialog, you specify what each column is going to be. We go ahead and click OK, and we have our graph. Now when you have multiple graphs, you may wish to merge them onto a single graph page. For example, here we have 4 different graphs. We want to go ahead and create a 5th graph, which is a combination of all 4. I can click on the Graph menu and choose Merge Graph Windows. In the dialog that opens, I now, again, this is another way of filtering on graph windows here. By default, it picks up all in the active folder. If I wanted to rearrange these a bit, what I can do is choose Specified. This is no longer grayed out, and I can click on this button, which brings me into a graph browser dialog. This folder structure, this hierarchy on the left, matches that of Project Explorer. And now I can, I'm not going to add any new graphs or remove any here. However, I could do that by just selecting and using these arrows, these buttons here. I want to simply reorder these, and I can do that by just dragging and dropping. So I want the order of 8, 9, 10, 11. Click OK. My preview will update. Now, what I do want to do is increase my horizontal and vertical gap a bit. And notice as I do that, the graph preview updates. When we have that set up the way we would like it, we can click OK. And now we have our graph window. Let's go ahead and maximize this. You may have noticed these red layer icons, and if you look closely, there's a watermark here indicating that speed mode is on. That's the same indication here by the red color. And you see as I hover the mouse, it says that speed mode is on. Speed mode lets you specify the maximum number of data points that can display for each data plot in a layer. This increases your screen redraw speed. To turn this off, you can click on the graph menu and go down to speed mode, and we can turn it off for all inactive page, means all the layers in our active graph window. Now we're almost ready to copy this and paste it into Word or some other application, as well as export it as a PNG file for the web. But let's go ahead and add some annotations. I'm going to right-click here and add some text. We're going to label these graphs. Okay, now what we want to do is just simply make sure they're lined up. So let me click on this one. We can shift select this one over here, and we can use these toolbar buttons on the right hand side of the screen to top a line. We can go ahead and do the same thing. And then we're going to start with this one. Let's see, we'll start. And we want to left align. And do the same thing over here. If you click on any of the text, you'll notice in the status bar, it tells you what the text is attached to and the size versus the actual size. So when you click on it here, it's set to 20 point, but it's actually displaying at 8 point. And that's because it's scaling with the layer. And if I double click here, remember that brings you back into the layer properties, and you go to the display tab, you can see the fixed factor here. It's scaling and it's no longer set to 1. Now if you click on these labels here, you'll see they're attached to the page. So attaching to the page, the size and actual size is the same. Alright, let's go ahead and copy this. We can do an edit copy page. So this is one way to copy it to the clipboard, and then we can open up another application such as Word and paste it in. It'll get pasted as an origin object. If I double click on it, it will launch another instance of allowing me to make some changes. Let's go ahead and change the color here. And then I simply want to click File, Exit, and Return to the document, and my changes will be reflected in Word. Let's go back to Origin, and now let's look at our export options. If I click on the File menu, we can go down to Export Graphs. In the dialog that opens, you'll see that Origin provides a long list of export file formats, which include both vector and raster formats. Let's go ahead and export as a PNG file. We're going to export the active page. There are options here to export multiple graph windows. Here's where you enter the file name. If you don't enter a name, it's going to take the name of your graph. It's going to be saved to your user files folder. You can click the little browse button here to specify a different path. We're going to leave these export settings alone. What this means is it's going to use the speed mode settings that have already been applied to the graph. However, you can control them independently on export as well. Image size, the default is the size of the page, the original paper size. You can uncheck auto and you can decrease the width. And when we click outside here, the height will automatically update. Let's turn on an auto preview. Here's the image, then here's the graph itself. Now the image size here is going to be controlled by the page or your width and height, the size, the image size, and your settings here, your DPI resolution. For the web, we can just set this to 72. Let's go ahead now and click OK. In the message log, we have a message here telling us that the graph was exported to the user files folder. Let's go ahead and take a look at the user files folder and our PNG export. If we right click here, we don't even need to right click actually, you can see the dimensions here, which with a width of 5 and a DPI of 72, you're going to get your 360. Thank you for watching. This concludes this presentation on an overview of graphing in Origin. I encourage you to watch the many more movies that we have on specific plotting features. Again, thank you.